Well, everybody probably knows David Knibbe. If you don't, David is the owner operator of Think Education, and we're very honored to have you this evening as our guest, David. So why don't we start with your Montessori story? How did you discover Montessori?
Well, I must start. I started selling education material about 50 years ago, and that was actually on the 8th of March 1973, when I started working for Modern Teaching Aids, and I worked for them for 30 years. And very interesting story was that in 1982 we lived for a year in Perth, and I came across Wilhelmine Duiker, who every time that I showed her something asked me how that would fit in Montessori. And I had no answer for that. So then quite a few years later, we moved to Sydney, and we were friends with a couple, and the mother had two children, or they had two children, and he selected the Montessori education, and the children went to Forestville Montessori, or Forest, in Sydney, one of the suburbs there. And the person that we met at this couple's place was Paul Seibel, and he was the principal at that school. And so he was also from the Netherlands. So we had quite a chat, and we met up quite a few times. Next minute, he was going to go to Brisbane as well. When we returned to Brisbane, and he became the principal here of Brisbane Montessori. So that's how the whole thing really started. So then one day, Modern Teaching Aids was offered the sole agency for Nienhuis Montessori, and that was my baby. And I worked with a lot of the existing Montessori schools from about 1995 onwards. And then in about 2001, Modern Teaching Aids was sold, and I wasn't all that happy anymore in the company, so I started my own company called Think Education Supplies with an agency that I bought, and it had the Gonzagaretti agency. So Gonzagaretti Montessori, I'd never even heard of it until I met them at a show, and ended up buying that and became the agent in Australia for Gonzagaretti, and also for New Zealand. And then after that, in about the year 2000, I got the 2005, I got the agency for ETC, who makes Montessori materials for the printed market, and they offered me the agency for that. And in about 2010, I got Nienhuis as well. So I ended up with virtually most of the companies. And then I really see an enormous lot of advantages in Montessori. And part of that also is because the Dutch education system is quite geared towards Montessori. I did not go to a Montessori school in the Netherlands, but a lot of the things I learned there are also applicable in Montessori. And so from there, I just developed more and more in Montessori. And then I came across Wilhelmine Duiker, who was willing to do the Montessori training course. And she had a school in Montessori Street in Kingsley in West Australia. And she used to come out every month. She came out for 2 days, a Saturday and a Sunday. She would fly out on the midnight flight from Perth, arrive in Brisbane at 5 a.m. And I used to pick her up from the airport, and we had about 15 people doing the training course. And that was held at a school that is that's really now Building Futures, but it wasn't owned by Building Futures, or it was owned by John and Gloria McKinnon at the time, and they later on sold that center. But we had our training course in there with 15 people. Some people flew all the way in from Melbourne to attend this training course, and we did that for 2 years with Wilhelmine coming up. And that really was the end of that particular training course, because Wilhelmine also was getting quite old. She was about 80 when she was teaching us. And she stopped when it was about 82, and I think she passed away in about 86 or something. And from there, I just kept growing in Montessori, and I saw more and more opportunities in it. And I really liked the materials and how there's all the control of error that's built into it, or the self-corrective part, as some people call it. So that's really my story, and I just keep going.
Yeah. So
Many
you
people
did
my age
Mrs.
are-
Dyker's training, is that
Yeah.
right? You took Mrs. Dyker's training.
I did Mrs. Dyker's training, but I never did the practical work. So I know how the bells work and how the materials work. Yeah.
Wow. So you really have a lot of insight into the materials. But you at Think Education, you sell other materials as well, non-Montessori
Yeah,
materials.
I sell a range of very high quality jigsaw puzzles, which are from a lady that I've known for years. That's called Tuzzles, and they're based now in South Australia, but before that they were based in Mackay. They cut them by laser, and we sell quite a few of their puzzles, not their whole range, because some of the puzzles don't fit into Montessori. I also sell a construction kit, which is really my only plastic construction kit, as lazy construction, which is my favorite construction when I worked for Modern Teaching Aids. Then we sell Kepler, which is a wooden construction and fits in very well with Montessori. And there's quite a few other items, and I'm constantly on the lookout for things that can complement the items. Nienhuis has had quite a few items in their Toys for Life range. That's the turnover sets, which I bought all their stock when they no longer wanted to have the item. And I bought all the Senso, which is a sensorial item, very good lotto. We'll go and make videos of those, and I'll put them on my website so people can see how these things work. But I still go around visiting schools.
Yeah, do you sell materials to non-Montessori schools and centers as well, or just Montessori?
That's really, they don't really buy Montessori items. They really buy the high quality items and the items that have a lot of interest. So the turnover items and the Senso items will go to non-Montessori schools. Same with our electric pencil sharpener, which is a very high quality electric pencil sharpener that's made by Heuting, who is the parent company of Nienhuis. But that's really the main thing. Yeah.
David, what percentage of your business would you say is Montessori?
Oh, it's probably about 80%.
80%. Wow.
Yeah.
So what differences would you say you've noticed over the years between your Montessori clients, Montessori schools, and non-Montessori schools?
The childcare centers, I've seen them developing, and so there's now more and more childcare centers that are Montessori based, which we really did not have. Building Futures probably was one of the first ones that were doing it. All the other schools were just working on school terms. And there's still quite a few Montessori schools that just work school terms, where childcare centers really are working 52 weeks a year in Montessori. In the development of materials, there are always schools, there are general schools that want to buy Montessori materials. And originally, I was asked not to sell Montessori materials to non-Montessori schools, but that's very hard to police, because you can buy them online, you can buy them wherever you want to. So that's...
Wow, that's interesting. Do you find yourself talking about Montessori to non-Montessori clients, trying to introduce them to the ideas of Montessori?
Well, it's... say, when you come to basic Montessori material like the pink tower, you don't sell a lot of them to non-Montessori centers. But still in the blocks, they can still see the advantage of using them. And then but a lot of them still go for the high quality jigsaw puzzles, construction material, etc. So the actual growth should really be in the non-Montessori section, because there's a lot more of them than there are in Montessori.
Yeah. Wow. What have you most loved about being part of the Montessori movement, the business of selling Montessori equipment?
Actually, there's quite a few things in them, but my youngest grandson goes to a Montessori center in Melbourne. And if you see what he does, he's not going to go to a Montessori primary school next year, and he's going to go to a normal school. And I don't know whether he's going to be very frustrated there, because he does all his work. He goes up to thousands in his number work, and he can write and he can read. And then all of a sudden he goes to a normal school. There is enormous advantages in Montessori, and I just like it. One of my daughters came across a book, and that virtually says that schools put children in pockets or in boxes, and when you're this old you have to do this, and when you're this old you have to do that, where Montessori just hasn't got that. You know, you're not going to go into a box when you're this age, etc. So it's far more interesting, it's far more inspiring, and it's very good leading in, you know, in the development of a child. And I think it's also for future future leaders in wherever it's in industry, whether it's in education, whether it's in politics or whatever. I think a lot of them with a good Montessori education would do very well in them.
Yeah, that's a good way, interesting way of putting it, that traditional schools put children in boxes. Pockets, I mean pockets, yeah. Yeah, so have there been any notable challenges in your time, in your half century dealing with Montessori schools?
There's some schools are very anti-Montessori, and most of the time that is because they don't really know Montessori. So sometimes you try to explain it. Sometimes if they're really interested to find out, I can leave them a video, because I was involved in a video that was made by a parent as a thank you to Montessori. They have 2 children, and when the last child went through through the school, she made a thank you video. It was a very high quality video, and we put that video on community TV. And at the end, we had to cut this video out because we had too many people from very outlying areas. Where was the nearest Montessori schools to them? So if you're in Rockhampton and the nearest one is on the Sunshine Coast, most people didn't want to go and leave Rockhampton and move to the Sunshine Coast. So it was quite frustrating that there was not a Montessori school near there. And I incidentally went to visit a friend when I was in Perth, and his wife was watching our video, which I thought was very interesting. And then I asked her what was the reason she was watching it. And she said, I really like that education system. And I thought that was really nice.
Was that Theo Zavros, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still in touch with them, actually.
Oh, okay. So, but what about, were there any challenges that you found in dealing with Montessori schools that you didn't have dealing with non-Montessori schools?
Never had that. I am a person that explains items. When I worked with modern teaching aids, we had display vans, and I would display an item and explain it. And that's what I really find always the very big challenge in selling education material. You front up at a school, and all of a sudden you had the teachers. In the olden days, they were given $200 to spend, And they most of the time wanted to spend more because they were so exciting with the material that I demonstrated. And so that's the same even with Montessori. If you really know how the item works, it is just fantastic. I can remember walking in a childcare center in Sydney one day, and the person I was supposed to see wasn't there. And I was sitting in the office waiting for them. And then one of the teachers was doing the cylinder blocks, I think it was. And she didn't really do a thing. And I asked her, I said, don't you do this and that and that? And at the end, I took over the actual class teaching of this particular item and showing the children all the different things they could do with just the cylinder blocks, and how that really leads into Montessori.
From what I know of the Montessori community, I would imagine that, correct me if I'm wrong, that Montessori clients can be very, shall we say, particular, like everything has to be just right. And do you find that to be true about your Montessori clients as opposed to non-Montessori clients, or would you say not?
Yeah, that's true. But then Mrs. Duiker, she built, going back on her school, she built that school single-handedly for the first classroom with her husband. And I think right at the end, they did that. And she bought then materials from Nienhuis direct, because he would often go to the Netherlands. And she had material in there that had been 26 years he had in the school. And then they bought new material, but all of a sudden the children were not as careful with the material as these original children were. So I don't know whether you still can get the same years of use out of Montessori materials. And the high quality is still there, but children seem to be much wilder or much rougher with the material nowadays than they used to. And some people may agree and some people may disagree with me.
Do you think the quality of Montessori materials has changed over the years that you've been involved?
I don't know. It's when I was at Nienhuis a few weeks ago, they had materials there that were originally made by, I'm not quite sure what his first name was, but by the original Mr. Nienhuis, who was making material for Maria Montessori in the Netherlands. And so whether the quality drops, the old factory that they had there in the Netherlands, that was constantly, all the machinery was adapted to make certain items. Now, of course, that's no longer the case. And you had these really old tradespeople making materials. So whether the material has really deteriorated, I'm not quite sure. There is a lot of industrial standards have changed. You can no longer use lead in paint, where lead used to give you extra strength when you used paint. So a lot of those things have changed.
What about the Montessori community in Australia? Have you noticed changes in the 50 years that you've been involved in the Montessori?
Well, I've not been involved in Montessori in the 50 years, so I've really been involved in Montessori about 25. And it's almost like a family. My wife, Dorothy, came with me one year to the show, and I was thinking of getting out of the business. And she said, you can't do that. All these people came up to you and gave you big hugs at the conferences and different things like that. And she said, you're just really part and parcel of the family. And she said, you can't leave that. So have I really seen a change? Some of the older people have all retired. Some of the people that have retired still are active in the Montessori community in some part, but they're no longer standing in front of classrooms. That's really probably what I've seen, and it doesn't matter where you go, whether I go to New Zealand all of a sudden, sometimes in New Zealand, and it's probably the same here, if you're really short of a teacher and you need to find someone, sometimes one of these retired teachers will come back in and take some work some days and then go back in their retirement.
Yeah. Montessori teachers never really leave teaching, do they? It's pretty hard. They just die.
Yeah.
So what was prompting, I have to ask, what was prompting you to think of leaving the business?
I always wanted to start my own business. And there was only with Modern Teaching Aids. A friend of mine owned Modern Teaching Aids, and he virtually left it up to you to run it. So that's why I was one of the first companies when these childcare centers started. I worked right through my holidays for 4 weeks trying to fit out my first childcare center. And because there was a lot of material that Modern Teaching Aids didn't have. So I had to source it all, get prices and work out our selling price and everything else on the items. And so you were really a leader in that. So then when the company was changed and sold, all of a sudden I had a boss, where before that you really never had a boss. You know, it's probably the way I work is, you know, you constantly see things. And if all of a sudden you restrict someone, that wasn't my cup of tea. That's why I left them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I misunderstood. I thought you said that when you were thinking of leaving the business and Dorothy said, no, you can't, you're part of the family.
Well, we were involved with the farm. And so either the farm had to go or this business had to go. So at the end, the farm went.
Oh, I see.
So that's
okay. Oh. What have been your most popular items that you've sold over the years, over the 25 years you've been in selling Montessori materials?
It has to be the pink tower and the broad
Pink tower, really?
cylinder blocks and the metal insets and things like that. Yeah. They're really your bread and butter lines there.
Yeah. What's the most difficult material that you have? The one that you wish you didn't have to sell?
I haven't got an item like that. There are some items that I sell very few of because they're for the older students. And you don't sell that many of them because, let's face it, most of the Montessori schools are all in the 0 to 6 area. So not an item that I find the bells fascinating, and there's 2 different sets of bells that we sell, but that's still incredible what you can do with the bells.
What about the puzzle maps with all those tiny little African or African countries that keep getting lost?
Oh, well, then you have to go, say the Gonzagaretti maps probably were the most difficult ones because every country has its own piece, where with Nienhuis maps, you've got some of the little ones have all joined as one piece.
Right.
So the original Gonzagaretti ones, they were probably the most difficult one, and they were a bit frustrating when I first took that over because they did not have a base. The original Maria Montessori map did not have a base. All you had was a frame, and you put your control of error under it, and then you put all the pieces in. And when you were finished with it, you could not pick up the whole map. You had to virtually pick up the frame, and then the pieces go back in another box. And that was apparently the original Maria Montessori puzzle maps, which Gonzagaretti made until I don't know when, probably until about 2005 or 2006. And that's when they started going over the clear perspex under the maps. And the pieces became thinner because some of the countries with the younger children, some of the countries would have been quite heavy for the students. But I still have a lot of the spare pieces of the Gonzagaretti maps.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the history of Gonzagaretti versus Nienhuis? Where did those companies originate?
Oh, Gonzagaretti started in Italy, and Gonzagaretti started before the war, before the Second World War. And I don't really have the exact history of it, but it was originally owned by some Jewish people, and they left Italy when Mussolini came to power and gave the whole factory to the staff. And then you had the people that had been there for quite some time were given shares. So Michele d'Oltrezzo inherited his shares through his father. So then the whole company did quite well and was going very well until they had a new managing director. And then the company was going to go virtually either bankrupt or was sold off. But they made all the material exactly the same, the way that Maria Montessori told them to make it. So for years, Africa was always brown, because that's where the brown people live, or the dark-skinned people live. Of course, you can't do that anymore now, but they still have that original map in their reigns. So all the material originally, when I asked them how come, oh, Maria Montessori asked us to do it like this, and Maria Montessori asked us to do it like that. And that's how it was all the original material. Where with Nienhuis really started in about 1950 or something, making material for Maria Montessori when she moved to the Netherlands to live. And slowly but surely it changed. And then they were making all these particular materials in Zellum, where Nienhuis had the factory. And then the other thing that happened to Nienhuis went also bankrupt quite a few times. And every time there is the last minute, someone saves them. And the first time it happened by, I think, some ex-Montessori students, or that people that have grown up as Montessori students and are now in business. And then it was sold to a French conglomerate. And then the French conglomerate also went bankrupt. And then the bank in the Netherlands bought it, the ING bank, I think, bought it. And they ran it for about 3 years or 4 years. And then they sold it on to Hoeting. Now, the parent company of Nienhuis is called Hoeting. Hoeting is still owned by the family. It's a family company, but it's quite a large company. And when I was there a few weeks ago, the actual turnover of Montessori from them is just a very small percentage of the total turnover of Hoeting. So that's the difference of the two companies. And then Gonzagaretti's new owner, about 10 years ago, did not want to do Montessori. So then they virtually went into an arrangement with Hoeting, that Hoeting would also manufacture the Gonzagaretti material. And that is now finalized, and is being done in China by a company that Hoeting owns in China. So really, both of the companies are the one. The difference is still that the Gonzagaretti still makes furniture, and they make an enormous lot of furniture. A lot of the schools in Italy all have Gonzagaretti furniture.
Why do you think Nienhuis has had such difficulty making a profit, sustainable profit as a business for so long?
I have no idea. There is all different, whether it was a family problem or whether it was a business problem, I have no idea. But it's going now on healthy feet, and it's on healthy ground, and it's all going well.
Yeah, it would seem to me that there's a very small market, but there's an awful lot of products that have to be made for that very small market. I wonder if that's part of the problem.
Yeah, That's very true. And of course, there's quite a bit of opposition now. There's a lot of material being made in China and other parts in the world. But it's still Nienhuis. If you want to buy the best, you just buy Nienhuis. It's an AMI approved company, same as Gonzagaretti.
Yeah. Are there any other companies now that sell Montessori materials that rival Nienhuis, that sell the whole range of Nienhuis?
Well, there's quite a bit of the Chinese. There's also other companies in Sri Lanka that manufacture Montessori material, but that's still not the same. When Modern Teaching Aids first looked at Montessori material, they bought a very big shipment from a company called Brown's. And I put that into the Brisbane Montessori School and asked them what they could check it with for quality, etc. A week later, I asked them if they rang me if I could please pick it up. They did not want the material. And virtually we had to take it to the tip. And because that just was not acceptable in the Montessori environment. And we really had to go to the Nienhuis, which is what we got at the end.
Yeah. There are a lot of companies, Chinese companies, that sell a few of the materials, but not the whole range. Are there any other companies currently, apart from Nienhuis, that sell the entire range of Montessori materials?
No one does that. That Nienhuis is really the one. And they're just extending their range, even for the upper primary.
Yeah. Does anyone have a question for David that you'd like to ask? Andy. You're on mute, Andy.
David, was already spoken about the Chinese companies. I'm in Thailand. And when you look here to the schools, it's actually either Nienhuis or it's mostly actually China.
Yeah.
Here. And the quality is very, very good, actually. On the other hand side, sometimes the colors are not the same, like in Nienhuis or so.
Yeah.
And sometimes also the materials doesn't seem to be the same, but they are more or less perfect. To make Montessori available for everyone, what would you think is the correct way? Because Nienhuis is very, very expensive.
Yeah.
We have had people here. They just released a nice video, and they said, okay, we can buy Nienhuis $20,000. We can buy it in China $10,000 for a classroom, or we can do it by ourselves for $2,000 classroom.
Yeah.
So when we compare 2,000 to 20,000 or 10,000, it means we can set up 5 classrooms instead of 1. So what is your opinion?
If they're at the same level, if the children are at the same level, and are you talking here at a 0 to 6-year-old students, or are you talking more of older students?
0 to 6, it's also 6 to 12, actually. It's the range between 0 and 12.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. You really can, whatever you can afford is what you can buy. So some schools that I've come across in the past used to or bought some very cheap items because they started with their budget was very low. Then when their budget increased, then they were able to buy the better quality material. And it's either up to you whether you're going to replace every single item like that, or whether you say, these are the items we use the most of, and we're going to use those with for example, Nienhuis or Gonzagaretti, or we just have a better quality material that you can get from somewhere else.
Problem is actually that people think when you have Nienhuis, you're authentic. You're an authentic school when you have the King Tower and whatever it is from Nienhuis, and when you bought it in China, you're not authentic. So it's a bit of strange thing, I think. What do you think about the authenticity?
I don't know. There is no patent on Montessori products, so you can really make the Pink Tower. And actually, coming on the Pink Tower, the original pink tower, which is really in the Gonzagaretti color, which is a very soft pink. And then you got the AMI pink tower, which really is the Nienhuis one, and that's the one most companies copy, is a much brighter pink.
What would happen if, that's actually where I'm working on, to make plans so that people actually can build the Montessori materials by themselves. I'm working very often in the open source area with open source software, open source cars, Open Motors, for example. They released a complete chassis for a car, and Renault and Toyota already building on this chassis the electric cars. Many people don't know this, but they are actually from an open source product. What would happen if we release plans how to do actually these materials? And some materials could even be printed out with 3D. Would this work to put down the costs and make it more available for everyone?
I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on that. Because there's already so many different Montessori items available. And then if you're in a country like yourself, where people or parents make their own material, which I'm sure has happened in many Montessori schools over the years, that parents make the first lot of materials, so students at least have some idea of it. And whether these drawings are available. Gonzagaretti at one stage had a book, which is no longer in print, and I still have one copy of it. But that gives you virtually how all these items were made, and that was done with the Montessori Society of Italy or something, and they produced so many books, and that was it. And they would never go in reprint because that was the promise.
Wow,
but that gave you virtually how all the material was made at that time.
But this would help a lot, this reprint actually.
I have no idea. There's a patent, something patent on this book. So when I asked them if they can please make some more, and I said, no, you've got the last copy, and that's it.
I guess ultimately what brings down prices is volume, right? As an item becomes more and more popular, it gets mass produced at greater and greater numbers, and the prices come down, as we're seeing now with electric cars. And in the Montessori community, our problem, I guess, is that we don't really have the volume because Montessori has not really increased. Why do you think that is? You talked about earlier, David, how you believe that Montessori is such a great educational method, and you wanted that for your grandson. Why do you think it's not spread to become more popular in this country?
The lack of education. When I was in New Zealand, the same. They just don't have enough people that get qualified to teach Montessori. But then you also have in Montessori, which I never knew until my wife, who works at the high school, came across the Montessori teachers that were there, and they were no longer in Montessori. They were trained in Montessori. So there must also be a frustrating part in Montessori. But I think the biggest thing is just the trained teachers. I know of schools in New Zealand that had to close because they can no longer attract qualified Montessori teachers.
Yeah, but
why do you think that is, David? Why aren't there enough Montessori teachers if there's a demand for them?
I don't know. It really depends who writes the curriculum and what sort of diplomas and whatever the thing is, where the training courses are. If you're in either AMI training courses or whether you do the AMS training courses. Some of them are done by correspondence and some of them are all face-to-face. I'm not going to go in detail what that is, but I think that's the biggest drawback. If you want to start and say, for example, in Rockhampton Grammar, you want to start a Montessori strand, then you would have to find a Montessori trained teacher who can set up the school, and you would want to have that this teacher stays there, because if 2 years in the program, all of a sudden this teacher decides to leave, which teacher is going to replace it, etc. So there's not enough trained Montessori teachers, and that's probably worldwide.
And it's like in German we have a saying, the cat is biting herself in the tail. You know, when the cats are running around and biting the tail. The problem is the price. Yeah, because the problem is the teachers which do a Montessori training, they have to quit the job for 3 years. They not earn anything. Yeah, so they have to invest a whole lot of money. And when they then start a school, what are they doing? They're starting a private school. How do they start it? Well, they put up a very price tag. Wow, fine. So you have another private school, it's expensive. So I think if whoever it is, and if you still have contacts, please talk to those Italians to make this book available under an open source license. I think this would change the world. If they would know how Montessori material can be made around the corner, yeah, then also the people will start using the material. When they start the material, they will ask, actually, how can I use it better? And then they will ask people which are trained in Montessori, and then they will help them to get into Montessori. And then they are interested to do a course. And then you can come up with a theory or whatever. But then you can convert one school after another. And it's this video what I have just received last week from a Burmese teacher from Myanmar. She's working with the Kom Loy Foundation, which is unfortunately no more in Thailand. But I said, wow, this is exactly what we need. We have to take the AMI training and turn it upside down. Not putting the theory at the beginning. We have to make the teachers addicted to Montessori first. We have to put them and let them experience what it means to be in a prepared surrounding. And the prepared surrounding is a kindergarten or the classroom. Actually, because the schools here in Asia, they're empty, like a hospital room. There is nothing inside. Yeah, they have some tables there, usually perhaps one shelf where they have some books there. And the teacher has in front his table where he has his toothpaste and comb and so on, what they're doing after they taught the 45 minutes or 30 minutes, then they're combing the hand and doing the cosmetics there before they then check the books, because this is the silent work for the teacher. That's how school is working here in Thailand. And this is terrible. When you compare this with a classroom where you have the materials here, where the teacher actually is obsolete, you don't need the teacher because the students are doing it by themselves. Then the teacher has the time to learn it. So please, if you have connection, talk to these people. Yeah,
I don't know whether I have the time for all that. I'm flat out as it is.
Well, you're also no young semester, so there's still time left. And for example, I started 2 days ago Montepedia, because I said we have a big problem. I need a way how we can translate things into other languages, because people from Africa said, Andy, do you have something available in French? Do you have something available in Swahili? Of course not. How can? Yeah, but we have a huge community of people living in this areas who probably could help to translate stuff. And so I have set up a wiki and building on this wiki step by step and call it Montepedia. You can look montepedia.com, and it's a step in work in progress, more or less. And next I will put the free books in there, and then said, look, translate it, because then we can multiply this to a lot of people, and the more people reading it, the more people get interested. And if we have the plans, wow, then we can show them, look here, you can build it. And then I don't have to recreate actually something what Montessori has done already.
Yeah, David, do you think that an online, affordable, online, high quality training that is much lower in cost and more accessible would really change the popularity of Montessori and help relieve the problems you talk about?
It's but the only thing you don't want to is water it down. So whether AMI, whether that's for the elite, and not all people can afford the elite. So either you're going to limit Montessori, or do you want to go and make these courses available? I'm not really a person to discuss that because I don't know enough about it, and I'm not really a trained teacher. But there is a definite demand for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Who is going to do that? I don't know.
I guess that's the $64,000 question, isn't it, in the Montessori community right now, which is, does training to be high quality, does training need to be exactly in the same image that it was 70 years ago when, you know, Montessori was alive? Does it have to be where the students are watching the trainer move the beads in front of them to be high quality? Or can it be more like trainings are now, which are self-directed, more online, and still maintain quality somehow? You know, what is the secret ingredient to quality? Is it sitting in front of a person watching them move the materials, or is it something else that can be done online with using the advantages of technology?
That's one of the things. That's one of the things Mrs. Duiker, because I think also because of her age, was very anti-computers. Because they were not around with Maria Montessori, and of course they're around and they're everywhere now. There doesn't matter what you touch, that's got computer chips in it. The same as what's probably going to go and happen with AI, and a lot of people, and including myself, don't know too much about AI, but you know that seems to be opening all sorts of doors. I don't know. My daughter is a university lecturer in engineering, and there's all sorts of new things coming up in that, and there's new faculties, new areas. It's the renewable energy is all coming up, and whatever the thing is. So there's an enormous lot of information out there. So I can't see what would stop Montessori. The same as, can you have you know, does it have to have every single lecture? Do you have to have materials? I don't know.
David, do you sell any materials with batteries?
No. I just try to stay away from it when material with batteries, or what I really wanted to have was a light table with a battery, and no one has ever made that to my knowledge, because that to me was where you can, a light table is always a problem because it had to be connected to a PowerPoint. And a light table that you can just go and put on a student's desk. Now you can look at it, and then another student can take it without a cable that is connected to it. I think that's a great big help. And I'm sure there's a lot of things with USB connectors that you can use. And that's the same in education, even electric pencil sharpeners if you want one, but we don't have that. All right.
So, David, can you help answer the question on that's plagued the Montessori community for 100 years, really? Why is the pink tower pink?
Why is the pink tower pink? That is an interesting question. I have to look that up. Pink has got something to do with early childhood. I've no idea.
Yeah, there are all kinds of theories that I've heard, you know, such as that the color paints that she used were the ones that were available, you know, during the war or something like that, that were, you know, cheaply available, and she chose them for those colors, and they don't really have any other significance.
Well, we have in Germany, we actually saw there's also a green tower. They are the same, but in green, in this like turkeys, like similar to this box. It's also green, or green.
Does it work the same?
We learned that that Montessori experimented with different colors, and the kids responded to the pink the most. So that's what we learned. But they were different colors, and actually it was able to buy it because in Germany, I think it was even the Italian Gonzales or Gonzaletti, they had a different color, or somebody. It was somebody in Europe who produced this in a different color. This was
I've never seen it. The only thing that I'm aware of that the original Maria Montessori pink was a much softer pink than the one that many of the other companies does. Gonzagaretti still make the soft pink.
Yeah, it's not the pink what you have in Nienhuis, for sure.
No, it's the one from Nienhuis is a very bright pink, and the one from Gonzagaretti is a nice soft pink.
Rosa, we say in Germany, yeah.
So that's.
What do you think about a lot of materials are now available also in digital form? So there are companies which are producing apps.
Yeah.
What do you think about the usage of these digital elements?
It's all the technology that's there at the moment. So that it's something that whether you like it or not, you can't stop it, and you may as well use it. And as new technology comes at hand, you know, there's all sorts of new technology coming up, and it's you know, it's very interesting. We're living in one way a very interesting time, and the other way I think, gee, you know, could we go back to the old days? I don't know, but you can't. You know, life goes on. So new things and new apps and all sorts of things come up, and new things like apps come up, and the new things like AI comes up, and etc.
What do you think about printing, 3D printing these maps? Because the maps have often parts in there which break.
Yeah. And
3D printing would be something which you could use very, very simple, actually, those maps, and they would be very, very exact. They would exactly fit in there, and they could be reproduced quite cheap if something gets lost. Because you put in the program and said, okay, you need Germany again, you click there, and it's simply printing out you to Germany, and then you color it, or even you get the color already depending on what you put inside this printer.
Yeah. So that all this is possible. I came across a printer in Germany as well that prints houses. Whole houses are manufactured by this printer, and that's absolutely fascinating.
2 days.
David, do you think is there anything about Montessori that needs to be updated to better fit the modern world?
I don't know what with the age of the children. One of the things that people have commented on is puzzle maps, because some of the pieces are so small that if a 3-year-old can actually swallow it, so it's a lot of responsibility on the teacher to have children under the age of 3 not to have access to them. That's in essence is one of the most dangerous items really that you could see in Montessori. That's virtually the only thing that I can think of. I just find the whole thing absolutely fascinating, with measurements and color and all these different things, and I'm just intrigued with the beats, how a young child can understand 1,000 cube. I can have 1,000 here or 100 of these beats in one length, and I can just build that whole thing up, which is absolutely fascinating. And I understand the number, and that's what actually happened to me when I understood mathematics. I could sit for hours on end doing nothing else but mathematical sums and understand what I was doing. And that's why probably I like Montessori so much.
And why you're so good at business. David, thank you so much for your decades of service making Montessori materials available
Thank you.
throughout Australia. And thank you for your time this evening telling us your
Right.
story.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, everybody. I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.